Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm going to be checking out the Happymodel Mantis85. This is the ready to fly version, so for under £100 I think it's around about £97 or around about $135. You get a FlySky i6 transmitter with it, but not only that, it comes bound and set up out of the box, and this is one of the main reasons I wanted to check this model out, because I see time and time again in the comments people complaining about these bind and fly models that come from China that just aren't set up whatsoever, and people don't want to be plugging their copters into Betaflight. They just want a complete package to fly out of the box, and that is what this is. The only thing that it's missing, of course, is FPV goggles. Now, you can get some of the cheap box goggles, probably for around about $20, something like that. So it's a fairly cheap setup. And if you look at the price, actually, so £97 with this transmitter, and I think they sell it for £89 without the transmitter. It means you're getting this 6-channel transmitter for £8, which is pretty nice, I think. So it is a 2S model only, and it has got 1935 propellers. Now, I don't really like these propellers that much. I first saw them on the King Kong series. They don't have a lot of power or performance. However, if you are a beginner, then you don't want a lot of power. And good news, there is quite a lot of clearance on this as well. So I do think you could easily put a 2-inch propeller on there. But yeah, I'm expecting beginner performance with this. And I'm calling this a beginner model, but I would still say this is probably good for a second model. First of all, master a toy grade copter, a brushed one, and then move on to something like this. Otherwise, you're just burning money, in my opinion. So, the motors, they are a 1102. They look like quite a nice motor. They are 9,000 kV again, so it's suited for a 2S battery. The kV of this is too high for a 3S, especially with the ESCs. The 4-in-1 ESC is actually BL Halley S. It's flashed with version 16.5, so if you want to do your D-Shot commands, then you'll need to upgrade that, but you can. And it came set up with D-Shot 600 on the flight controller as well. However, it does have a built-in buzzer, which is set up as a voltage alarm. I think it was set at 3.3 volts personally. For a 2S battery, I'd set it probably about 2.9, otherwise your buzzer is going to be going off. But yeah, the battery, I was a little bit disappointed with the battery, to be honest. It's a 400 milliamp and it's only 30C. And when you are powering up so much stuff, you know, the all-in-one camera, the ESCs, the flight control, it's got Betaflight on-screen display. 30C and a JST connector is not usually a good combination. However, I'm going to fly it and see what it's like, and hopefully we don't get any brownouts or flips of death, etc. So it weighs, actually it only weighs 54 grams. They say it's 49 grams in the manual. Maybe that's without a receiver, but yeah, the receiver comes attached on this already. And then it's just 77 grams with a battery. Of course, you can get some higher C batteries quite easy on the 2S. I quite like the Ishin 450 milliamp ones. Those are about 80C, and those usually perform pretty well. But yeah, the flight controller above that, it's a tiny, tiny flight controller. I think it's 16 by 16, actually. And it's a Omnibus F4 SD. It came flashed with Betaflight version 3.2. And as I say, completely set up and already bound to this. And this is something which I think is important to a lot of people. And when I've gone in there and taken a look at the settings, there's actually only 3 or 4 things that I would change for my personal preference, and those are motor stop. So motor stop was turned on. I've changed that just because I really struggle to do my maneuvers. I'm so used to coming down on the throttle completely, and if you have motor stop turned on, then the motors will stop when you do those low throttle maneuvers. So I've turned that on. And I've changed the rates. It was just set to 0.7. It does look like it's got its own PIDs in there. So yeah, I've got 0.8 on the rates. And the last thing that I have changed is the Rssi value was set on the on-screen display. So as this is the FlySky 2A protocol, then it doesn't actually have Rssi value, so it was just a flashing 0. But all of these things that I have changed, you don't really have to change them, and they're just personal preferences. This will fly out of the box without plugging it into a computer, and I think that is important for a lot of people. Oh, one other thing I did change is the beeper. It was set up on the AUX3, but because this is a 6-channel transmitter, actually it tells you everything you need to know when flying this copter on this little sticker on the box. So this is the box that it comes in. And by the way, I like that it fits in the box with the props on. It's always a plus point for me. It tells you here, Luke, it says already binded, it should be bound, I guess, with the i6. And then it says switch A is for arming, so that is switch A there. And then it says switch C, so it actually tells you we've got acro there, but it's actually acro without air mode, so this is why I've changed it. And then this one is angle mode, which is great for a beginner, and then this one is acro and air. So even though it's come flash with version 3.2 of Betaflight, it doesn't have air mode permanently on. So I've left that because I wanted to fly it out of the box, but it does have air mode selected in the mode. So all I've done is just one simple change when it's in that up position there. So acro but no air, I have also set the beeper to go off because you can't have it on another auxiliary, with this just being the 6-channel version. Even though we've got all of these switches here, you can only actually have 2 at the same time. Of course, there is a hacked bit of firmware that unleashes all that, but you're not going to be bothered about that if you are just interested in flying this out of the box. So yes, we have the lost model alarm up the top there, and then angle for the beginner, and then down here I have got acro and air. By the way, this only comes in mode 2, so I have converted it into mode 1 if you're wondering why my throttle is on that side there. But of course, you have to add 4 AA batteries. I've already done that as well. So back to the copter, and we have a all-in-one FPV camera. It is a CMOS camera, but you have to remember that they are working to a budget here. It's 25 milliwatt, it's 48 channel. They do say that it switches between PAL and NTSC. However, I'm only seeing 1 button here, and the instructions are showing 2 buttons. It doesn't really matter, but this one seems to be stuck in NTSC, if that is a problem for you. Not a problem for me. I'm not too keen on this mount here because it does wiggle quite a bit, and you have to tighten it up with this little screw. It was quite loose out of the box, but it's quite a small thing, and then it's for adjusting your camera angle there. This top plate is pretty thin, but it seems pretty strong, and a nice little touch, we've got this aluminium spacer here as well, which is giving strength to the frame. And despite it having this metal here, it's still pretty light, so I quite like that. It feels really strong. It's a unibody, of course. I'm not too keen on these wires coming along here, but you know, it's not a deal breaker. And also this JST connector here, you know, they could have maybe tied that down because that could go up in the props, but when it's underneath here, hopefully won't be too bad. The receiver, I actually like how they've mounted it. It's got this heat shrink around it here, and there's a little extension on the back part of the frame, and it fits perfect there. I like that. The only thing is, I would say the antenna, it could lift up and get in the props, but if you bend it down before you take off, and then with the airflow blowing down, then hopefully it won't be too much of a problem. You could just, I don't know, maybe use a cable tie around there. Just a small thing, I guess. So also in the box you are given these two Velcro pads. I guess the idea is that you stick it underneath and use it on the battery, but I never use this because I'm always switching out the batteries. I prefer a silicone mat, which you haven't got here, but again, they're working to a budget. You've got a spare set of these propellers. You've got some screws in there and a couple of rubber bands as well, so maybe you could use that around here to tie down the antenna, and also this JST cable there. You could do two birds with one stone with that. And then you have a little Allen key here, and this was useful for tightening up this little screw here, and that's pretty sturdy there as well. And that's pretty much everything that you get in the box. Quite a nice box. And of course we have got the manual as well, which actually I haven't needed to look at all, but it does tell you everything you need to know. It's got all your frequency tables, etc. But you can see the LEDs on the back there, so you can see those nicely if you want to tune your goggles into it. So one line of lights is for your bands and the other for the 8 channels of that band. Quite nice. And of course we've got sleeve dipole antenna on here as well, so you're probably going to want to use a linear antenna on your FPV goggles or monitor. But yeah, I really like the manual. It reminds me of the Eachine manuals there. And yeah, it tells you everything, but you don't really need this because, as I say, everything's set up with this guy, so I really like that about it. So let's go and do some flying with it. Now I'm going to be using my Fat Shark Attitude V4 goggles here, and I'm having to use these because my Dominator HD3s have had the DVR pack in on them, so I'm gonna have to open a ticket and send those off, but it's not a huge problem. I am using a diversity receiver here. It's the Furious FPV True D, and that's in conjunction with a Bandicoot linear antenna for this linear antenna here, and also the Omway Cloverleaf antenna. I like to give this disclaimer because you get a much better picture using the Bandicoot patch and a Cloverleaf antenna in conjunction with diversity, so I just want to put that out there. Okay, so on the line of sight flight, I'm usually looking for a couple of things. The first one is drift. If we have any drift issues in angle mode, and this is usually quite important for a beginner model, and you can only really tell that after it's been flying for a while. It's something that tends to gradually get worse. The next one is punch. So that's the punch out there, and just as I suspected with these propellers, it's not aggressive at all, but it's fine. I think it'd be fine for a beginner, and then you could switch out the props to maybe a 2-inch prop or one of those 5-blade props that are the 1935 size if you want a bit more power. But for a beginner, I would say that power is ample. You can hear the buzzer going off at the top of the throttle there, and that's probably down to this battery here being a low C rating, and also the voltage warning is set at 3.3 volts, I think, so you could probably reduce that a little bit more, I would say. I'm also looking for flips of death as well. You know, we have a bottleneck with the JST connector, and with the low C battery that can usually cause flips of death, so we'll see if that becomes a problem in the flight, but it usually manifests itself early on. So I'm now going to flick into acro, and this is acro and air mode, and I'm looking for any tuning issues, although it can be quite hard to tell when doing line of sight, so it's better to see if you have any tuning issues in FPV, but I'm looking for initial issues and I'm not seeing any so far, so that's pretty good. I mean, it's not an acro monster, but you can do acro with it fine. and I'm not hearing any crazy vibrations or anything like that, so I think the tune's probably okay. Of course you will want to mess around with that the more you get into flying, but I think the idea of this one is for it to be ready out of the box, and so far it seems to be that. No flips of death. You might find that as the battery gets low that it will do a flip of death at the end because the ESC resets, so obviously when you're flying FPV you want to give yourself plenty of time and voltage spare to land. But we got the beeper on constantly now, so it'll come in for a landing. And let's see if I can just flick it back into angle to see if we've got any drift. No drift, so that's good. Let's come in for a landing and I'll do some FPV with it. Okay, let's check out what it's like through the DVR. I can see some of the frame in shot, but it's not too bad. Picture looks okay. Not sure what's happening with that artificial horizon, but that seems to be all over the place. I usually turn that off anyways. So yeah, the battery is sagging quite a bit. I think it needs a better battery, but the reception, the video reception is great. Yeah, look at that, all the way down to 5.9 volts there. I don't think we're going to get a long flight time. I mean, usually I'd be landing at around 6.5 volts, but this one is cruising at that. What on earth is going on with that artificial horizon there? Wonder what happens if I stick it into angle mode. It's not drifting, so just dodgy. There you go, it's leveled out a little bit. So you can do acro with this. The tune doesn't seem too bad. Pumping on the throttle there, and it's pretty level, so I'd say the tune was okay. I think it'd be fine for a beginner, maybe a second model. Little bit of vibration at the top of the throttle, that's going to be that camera mount, I would say, but not debilitating. The picture's pretty clear. The range seems pretty good. I don't want to take it out too far because of this battery. We don't have any Rssi value here, but no, that's about as far as I'd want to go out with the battery being that low. Really should be landing, what are we at there, 1 minute, nearly 2 minutes. Not hearing the buzzer going off yet though, so maybe this can go pretty low, but really I'd recommend upgrading the battery. Oh, it's like the battery is dipping there, so I'll get ready to come in for a landing. Yeah, short flight time with this one, but it flies okay, I would say. Maybe a different battery, maybe switch out to an XT30 connector and change the props as an upgrade for sure. But if you wish to get one, I'll put a link in the description. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.